To GPS. Today I want to talk about getting started. We're just going to try to have a quick introduction into how to begin to use the program, how to move around a little bit, and how to make changes to the feeding program to get different results. We'll go into greater details in all of the various aspects a little later on, but today we're just going to take a look at how to get the program going. Okay, let's get started. So I have my icon here on my desktop. I'll go ahead and click that a couple of times, get things started, and I come up here with the main screen. Lots of information about the feeding program. There's metabolizable protein, metabolizable energy, blah, blah, blah. But what I want to do today is, with this video, is just to show you how we can make changes to everything. Now, what we're looking at is the results of this simulation. This is the output as a result of all of the inputs. So let's look at how we get inputs into the program. I can feed one of three types of feed categories to the calves. I can feed liquids, I can feed grains, I can feed forages. Let's take a look at the liquids. So I've got a couple of options actually in all of the offerings, liquid, grain, or forage. I can have a feeding program or I can look at the composition. Let's begin by looking at the composition. This is of the liquid now. So we see a new box that pops up, and we can move this box around, resize things, look at the things in greater detail. So in the composition, we have a number of nutrients that we can look at, and I can select any number of nutrients, and trust me, there's a lot of nutrients. But let's go and look at 16 of them. So you can see here's a list of the nutrients for my 2617 milk replacer. On a dry matter basis, we're feeding 27% protein, 17.7% fat, 6% ash, etc. So I can look at the composition and make changes to these as I need to. So if my protein is actually 26% rather than 27, I can make those changes. And by the way, as I make changes, the simulation will recalculate. So let's say, for example, that rather than 17.7% fat, I actually have 10% fat. So I'll make that change, and if you watch the graph to the right, you'll see how this change influences the predicted growth of the calf. And you can see there were some subtle changes that took place there. So let me go back to 17.1% and then click OK. I can look at the feeding program as well. In the case of the liquids, I have a number of steps or periods that I can use to feed calves different amounts of feed. So in this case, I've got 5 steps or 5 periods. I'm going from day 3 to day 7, feeding 600, 8 to 21, feeding 750, 22 to 56, I'm feeding 800 grams, and then I begin reducing the amounts to weaning. Now, everything in the white I can change. The gray ones are the beginning of the period. That's always the day after the end of the last period. So I don't have the chance to change those. So if I go ahead and tab across, I can make changes to any of these. And you watch, let's go ahead and move this over here so we can take a look at what happens as we change the feeding volumes. You watch this liquid line and you'll see these will be changing. So let's reduce this from 750, which would be probably right in here, and instead let's feed 500. Well, you can see, no, it was actually right in here, that this declined, and you can see there were a number of other changes that took place. I'll go back to 750, and you can see how the body weight curve changed as well as the milk replacer intake change. I can feed as much as I want. Here between 22 and 56, I'll feed 1,200 grams. And you see lots of changes that took place there. I can have as many as 20 of these periods, 20 steps, for feeding various amounts. Now, as I increase the number of steps, you'll see there'll be another period that occurs. From 71, this defaults to 77. And of course, I can change this. Maybe we're just feeding 100 grams to day 80, for example. And you can see now we're feeding to day 80. I can also reduce the number of steps. Let's go back to 3 steps. Now, you notice the graph didn't change yet because I haven't recalculated everything. It doesn't recalculate until I make another change. Okay, so now we see the change. We're feeding at 800 grams to day 56 and then abruptly weaning. Look at how we can change the feeding program or the nutrients. And by the way, you don't have to go back and forth between the liquid feeding program and the composition. You can just click here and change the nutrients if you'd like. So in this case, I'm going to go back to about 12 or 13 nutrients, and I can go and look at the composition, or I can click here and go back to my steps. Either way, for this works just fine. I can do the same thing for the grain program. Here, let's look at the feeding program for grain. Now, in this case, I'm feeding two different calf ingredients, calf starters and growers. I can have up to 6 different ingredients if I choose. As I add more, I need to select from the library, the starter library, which types of feeds I will be feeding. So let's say I want to feed a lower cost grower feed, for example. Oops. No, I do want that 14%. So there we are. Now, I will be able to enter, well, let's get rid of those for now. That gets a little complicated. So I'm going to feed 2. I can enter my prices here for cost per ton. The first day that, the first day the calves offered this starter feed is on day 3, and the last day will be on day 56. I'm offering 9 kilos as a maximum. I can actually reduce that to limit the amount of starter that the calves are fed. This is no forage. There's no forage here, so we're not including any forage here, and there's no additive that improves the growth of the calf at this time. Now on day 57, I'm switching the calves to this grower feed from day 57 until day 122. Now, I also have a maximum here of 3. If I were to, for example, to change the maximum to, let's say, 3 kilos, if you watch the calf starter graph, which is the blue one here, you'll see that the simulation changes and doesn't allow the calf to eat more than 3 kilos a day. As a result, the model is going to predict that the calf is going to eat much more forage as it's trying to obtain enough energy. Okay, so that's the forage program. I can click out of that and go back to my nutrients and display the nutrients that I want to look at. Dry matter, protein, fat, ash, etc. Now, in some cases, I may not be terribly interested in something like lignin, for example, in my calf starters. So if I click on the column that says lignin with my mouse, that column will disappear. So this is a good way for us to just not have to look at all of the, so if I'm clicking on these columns of amino acids, if I don't want to look at them, then I can get rid of them. Okay, now same situation for the forages. Here's my forage. I've got some sorghum hay. Let's say if I wanted to add a second forage, I can do that. And I've got a whole list of forages here that are available. So let's say I want to start offering some corn silage, typical corn silage here. That's 35%, dry matter, 7% protein, etc. Now, if I go to the feeding program, you'll see, like for the calf starters and growers, that we have a cost. When do we offer begin? When do we offer at the end? The percent of the dry matter is forage and additives. Now, you'll notice we got a little crazy stuff going on here. That's because I have set my calf's corn silage to 100% of dry matter. And of course, that doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to reduce that to 10% of dry matter. And you can see here now that as things change, there's a much greater increase in as-fed dry matter, as-fed intake, because calves are now eating a combination of sorghum hay and corn silage, typical corn silage. So in this case, it's going to be somewhere around 18% of the total ration dry matter up until the calves are limited in their grain intake, when everything starts to increase as well. So that's a quick way of looking at how to manipulate the program, changing the feed composition and the feeding program here for the grains, the concentrates, and the program will recalculate the simulation. So hopefully that will get you started as far as being able to look at what the program can do, some of the outputs, and look forward to some other interesting videos in the near future. Thanks.